Welcome back. Joining me is John O'Connell, chair of the IPFW Department of Theater. He's here to talk about the upcoming production of Arthur Miller's All My Sons, which opens on November 11th at the Williams Theater on the campus of IPFW. John, good to see you.
Thanks for having me, Chuck.
All My Sons, written by Arthur Miller, very famous American playwright. Tell us a little bit about Arthur Miller, perhaps some of the other plays he's written, and what themes he generally covers in his work.
Well, Arthur Miller, I think, is one of the really, sometimes one of the unsung heroes of American theater. I think Tennessee Williams gets a lot of credit, where Arthur Miller came about the same time as Tennessee Williams. But Tennessee Williams likes to write about a lot about the American family, about American values, how we sometimes, those things clash, and that's specifically in All My Sons. You know, there's this movement on behalf of the lead character to save his family and to save his company, pushed by the monetary value of war, and really how World War II made a lot of people rich.
Well, tell us a little bit about the story. You're saying that this is a story about a family.
It's about a family. Joe Keller, in a Midwestern town. You have to kind of figure out where it is when you're directing it. Arthur Miller doesn't want you to, he doesn't say a specific town. He wants you to put it where it would sort of be middle America. And Joe Keller runs a manufacturing plant. And prior to the play starting, his company put out some parts that caused 21 planes to come down in Australia and kill 21 pilots.
During World War II.
During World War II, yeah. Now, that content is actually based on some events that happened in World War II. Some manufacturers who made a profit off of sending defective parts to the military. And so these parts were sent out, 21 pilots came down, and Joe Keller was prosecuted. He was exonerated, however, his partner sort of was thrown under the bus and went to prison. And the play takes up 3 years later, when that partner's daughter comes back and is romanced by the son of Joe Keller, his only heir left. And the conflict that ensues after is sort of this idea of and Arthur Miller asks this question a lot in all of his plays. So where do we have, what is it our allegiance to, the dollar or the family?
Yes, very much.
Yeah, and his wife even says, Joe, you can't blame this on family. You can't say that family was more important than the lives of those 21 pilots.
Right.
And almost throughout all of Arthur Miller's plays, he likes to make us look at that American dream of building a company and creating a family and having a legacy to hand down. At what value, at what risk, or what cost is that?
Of course, we also saw that in Death of a Salesman.
Death of a Salesman.
Which is his famous play. By the way, both these plays, I think, won a Tony Award.
Yes, they both won Tony Awards. This actually is his first successful play. It's kind of an interesting story, the origins of All My Sons. He had written several plays that were unsuccessful, and his mother-in-law told him about these World War II incidents, and she said that would be a good plot line for you. And so he decided to start to look at writing a play on that idea. But he told his mother-in-law, he said, if this play isn't successful, I am done with playwriting. So in 1947, this play premiered and it won him a Tony Award, and the rest is history, as they say. But he said, if this isn't successful, I'm not going to be a playwright again.
Indeed, and it was very, very successful. In what ways does this play compare to plays of the Greeks, a Greek tragedy? Explain to us a little bit what a Greek tragedy is, and then.
Well, this is called, Arthur Miller's responsible for this idea of the American tragedy. Tennessee Williams is known for what we call lyrical realism. Arthur Miller, we coined the phrase the American tragedy because of his playwriting. This idea that a Greek tragedy, has to have some common elements. Most importantly, that someone falls from grace. A very important figure, King Lear, fell from grace, Hamlet fell from grace, due to their own actions. Something in their own personal
that
behavior,
they might not have known of.
That they might not have known of, exactly, or something in their personality is out of skew and it drives them to take actions that they shouldn't take, and they fall from grace. Death of a Salesman. Willie Loman is a normal guy who just falls from grace. And Joe Keller is a successful businessman, a successful man who falls really far from grace because of the action that he took. It takes place in 24 hours. Greek tragedies tend to take place in 24 hours. It takes place in one location. This all takes place in the backyard of Joe Keller's house. And last, which I think is kind of one of the things that's most interesting, is that usually in a Greek tragedy, the denouement or the resolution to the conflict is delivered by a messenger, someone who's not attached to the real story. And
the Oracle of Delphi.
Exactly, yeah. And in this case, it's actually the young woman who came from New York, the partner's daughter, Anne Deaver comes in, and she reveals a letter in Act 3. That is really the turning point in the play. It is that climax of revealing the contents of this letter that drive all the rest of the play and the resolutions, the unfortunate resolutions.
Why did you decide to do this play?
Well, I'm selfish. It's really been one of my favorite plays. People don't do it very often. They do Death of a Salesman, they do The Crucible, they don't do All My Sons. I decided to do it, number one, because I like it, number two, because we could cast it, but number three, also, you know, my job as an educator is to give our students a well-rounded theater education that has Shakespeare, has musical theater, and has some of the American classics. And Arthur Miller is of the American canon that our theater students should know about, but also a lot of our theater is attended by the general population of IPFW, and they should be introduced to Arthur Miller and the American canon. I'm worried about that, because in the lobby today, I heard this woman, this young lady coming out of a fundamentals of performance class, and I heard her say to her friend, this All My Sons thing, I hope it has as much singing and dancing as that forum did. And I thought, oh boy.
Yeah, well, I was just going to ask you if it was a comedy or not.
It's not a comedy, and there's no singing and dancing. It is a classic tragedy.
But it's not only the students of IPFW, I think it opens the community
to
some of these serious ideas. You know, getting back a little bit to the whole idea of Greek tragedy. You know, in Greek tragedy, the conflict was always with the gods. The gods have now deemed you unworthy, and therefore tragedy and, you know, pathos is upon you. And I read somewhere that in modern literature, rather in modern drama, and certainly in modern art, it's not about man versus God or man versus nature or man versus, you know, something else. It's about man versus an idea. You know, it's ideas of capitalism versus family, you know, work versus personal obligations that really conflict us in this day and age.
Well, they drive us. That first one you said, man versus capitalism, they drive Joe Keller to take some actions that he has to take the consequences for, which he's refusing to do. He says at the end of Act 2, it's a 3-act play. He says at the end of Act 2, he says, if nobody made any money on this war, then I won't make any money on this war. But nothing was shipped out of Detroit. No parts, no machines, no trucks were shipped out of Detroit without somebody pocketing some money. And you know, that's his argument, that he's just doing what everybody else was doing.
Well, that sounds familiar. You know, and it's just you know, it's not like they're bad people. It's just sometimes good people make mistakes, and they're unaware of the consequences of their actions. And I think that's what's so beautiful about tragedy that's been handed down to us since the Greeks, the whole form of it.
The thing about Joe Keller, though, the lead in this play, is that he's not innocent. We find out later that he's not necessarily the most innocent fellow. And the challenge for me in directing this play and working with Robert Phillips, one of our associate faculty members, in playing that role, is sort of not showing that right away. Not showing that this guy can turn on a dime. He didn't get to be a very successful manufacturing tycoon without having a darker side.
Without paying the price. Great piece of humanity, this play is.
Absolutely.
Now, you also do other things in the department.
We do.
You're doing something really wonderful. You're touring Shakespeare around all the high schools, and that's called Brush Up Your Shakespeare. Tell us a little bit about that.
Brush Up Your Shakespeare, I started that about when I came here in 2007, and it's been really successful in Northeast Indiana. We go out we went out last spring, we're going out this spring. We take 4 actors and a stage manager. They're a professional troupe. We pay them a salary, and we go to area high schools and do a 50-minute Shakespeare introduction. Last year we did 17 high schools.
17 high schools?
17 high schools. We saw over 2,000 students.
Do any of those students ever end up maybe contacting you or coming to school here at IPFW and saying, wow, you know, I'm glad you stopped by our high school. I never saw Shakespeare before.
This year, actually, we have the fruits of our labor. Some of the incoming freshmen were people who saw the Brush Up Your Shakespeare last year. So it does have value. But I mean, we use it as a recruiting tool. But more importantly, one of IPFW's mission is to have community outreach, community engagement.
Absolutely.
And I think that's that's one of the things that the theater department can do, is go into the high schools as opposed to having them come to us.
Yeah, sometimes it's a little bit easier, and these days it's hard for high school students to leave the actual school. They got a lot of things going on during the day, but I saw that production, and it's really quite a, it's not just a play, it's not a Shakespeare play, it's sort of a
scenes.
combination
It's
with a theme.
There's scenes from various plays, Hamlet, Midsummer Night's Dream. We do 5 or 6 scenes, but there's a lot of stuff in between the scenes that introduce the students to who Shakespeare was, what that period, what Elizabethan theater was like. And there's a lot of modern stuff too. I mean, they do some rap in it, they do some hip hop in it, they do stuff and the students, there's a lot of student participation as well.
Right, and then you're actually doing a student production, a student matinee for All My Sons, getting back to the high schools and the outreach.
Yeah, actually by popular demand. In August, someone emailed me and said, "Are you doing a matinee, a high school teacher?" And I said, "No, we're not. We only do usually Shakespeare." And then by the time the third email came through from a high school person telling me they wanted
Absolutely.
I said, "You know what? I'm missing the ball here." So we quickly threw together a schedule, and yeah, we've sold 200 seats in a week and a half for a matinee, high school matinee.
You know, it's a classic piece of work. It goes over some great ideas. I think seeing a play like All My Sons really shows one what the power of theater can be, John.
Right. Yeah.
I wish you the best on the show. It opens November 11th here at the Williams Theater.
Veterans Day.
On Veterans Day.
Uh-huh.
What a coincidence.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Chuck.
For more information about how you can get tickets for All My Sons, contact the Schlatzline box office at 481-6555. Arts Weekly airs every week, Tuesday through Thursday on College Access Television, and most Sundays on WFWA PBS 39. You can also see us on YouTube and Facebook, and follow us on Twitter. I'm Chuck O'Connor. Thanks for tuning in to Arts Weekly. Join me next week with guests Jim Schmidt and Cara Jarik from the Plymouth Church, and Dr. Haig David West and Jim Gabbard from the IPFW Department of Visual Communication and Design.